Before we begin, I thought it would be fun if everyone lets me know in the comments where they're watching this video from. And while you're down there, don't forget to subscribe. Now, let's start today's episode. Dragons are legendary creatures, often serpentine or reptilian, featured in many cultures. Two main traditions exist: the European dragon, rooted in folklore and linked to Greek and Middle Eastern myths, and the Chinese dragon, with counterparts in Japan, Korea, and other East Asian nations. Though they may have evolved separately, these traditions have influenced each other over time, particularly with the cross-cultural contact of recent centuries. The April 1st, 1998 online edition of Nature magazine revealed the discovery of a near-complete skeleton of a theropod dinosaur in North Dakota. The discovery was referred to in an online article by Henry D. discussing dragon-like dinosaurs. The creature was named after Smaug, the notorious dragon featured in J.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit. The dinosaur skeleton had reportedly been discovered by Randy Spaldgrave. This was at the Museum of the University of Southern North Dakota. The exciting part of the discovery, according to the article, was that the researchers believed the dinosaur could have flown. In actuality, the University of Southern North Dakota does not exist, though it has been made famous by Peter, who refers to it as the location where the music of the obscure 18th century composer, P.D.Q. Bach, was first performed. It turned out this was a hoax, but there are some who believe that dragons do exist. These photos reportedly depict a 60-foot dragon skeleton unearthed in northern China's Hebei province. Some observers insist it's a hoax. A translation of the story says the skeleton measured around 60 feet long, with a horned skull and two tiny arms at the neck-body joints. The long, thin serpentine body matches the Chinese versions of dragons. However, the skull seems to be more like an antelope. Some witnesses believe the bones appeared to be from multiple cows, assembled to deceive the public or for use in a film or TV show. It seems that every strange fossil found in China is quickly labeled as a dragon before proper analysis, with dragon enthusiasts often being misled by both hoaxes and actual dinosaur fossils. A supposed dragon fossil discovered in 1996 was later revealed to be a prop for a documentary. Meanwhile, the true nature of the alleged dragon skeleton remains unresolved. If you're fascinated by unsolved mysteries and enjoying the video so far, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up to stay updated on all our latest content. Moving on to the next mystery. The Palpa Flat Mountain, along with the Palpa Lines or Palpa Geoglyphs, is a mysterious site in Peru's Palpa province. It features large-scale geoglyphs created by removing reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles from the surface, revealing lighter-colored soil underneath. The designs, some of which are over 500 feet long, vary in size. The discovery of Palpa Flat Mountain has been seen as compelling evidence that ancient civilizations may have had advanced technologies. Theorists have often posited that perhaps the gods of ancient cultures that supposedly descended from the stars were not actually gods, but rather advanced life forms. This would make sense given the fact that many cultures directly write about how the gods came from the stars or on machines that could fly. Interestingly, various civilizations talk about ancient beings descending from the sky, with amateur researchers saying that this evidence is documented across various different cultures and civilizations. Interestingly enough, the ancient Nazca tribes also seem to hold a similar belief to their religion, and the evidence in the area only shows this further that it could very well be the case. As many different pilots flew over the area of the ancient tribes, a surprising discovery was made in regards to what they could see from the sky. Lines drawn out in the desert were made visible from the sky that appeared to be created over many miles of distance. In fact, the lines were detailed images and navigation trails that would have helped possible aircraft find areas to land and travel to. This was made only more interesting as located nearby these large creations is that of the Palpa Flat Mountain. Located on the Palpa Flat Mountain is a completely flat mountainside, as if flattened down by vast ancient technologies. This is made more peculiar as it seems to be the only flat mountain in the region, with a top that looks artificial cut from its base. Located on this flat top are lines and creations that pilots have often mistaken for a landing strip for aircraft. This has led many of the ancient theorist communities to believe that perhaps the tribe helped their gods by creating these lines in the sand that were only visible from the skies. These lines could be used similar to that as modern-day concrete arrows used to point towards landing strips and other aviation-important signals. This would be a plausible explanation as the lines on the ground are not visible and would not be able to be used religiously or for any other important purpose without the ability to see it from the sky. Interestingly enough, the lines seem to be very old and ancient and provide proof as to the tribe's advanced knowledge in geometry in order to create massive images in the sand that they could never see themselves. Additionally, these pieces appear to be images of things the tribes held with utmost importance, such as that of different kinds of animal life and strange symbols that are nearly impossible to understand. The Palpa geoglyphs are thought to have been created by the Paracas and Nazca cultures, who lived in the region between 500 BCE and 500 CE. The designs depict various animals, including birds, monkeys, spiders, and lizards, as well as geometric shapes and human-like figures. Some of the designs are so large that they can only be seen from the air, which has led to much speculation about their purpose and origin. One of the most intriguing aspects of the Palpa geoglyphs is their alignment with the celestial bodies. Many of the geoglyphs are aligned with the sun, moon, and stars, suggesting they may have had astronomical functions. Some researchers believe the designs could form a vast star map for navigation or a calendar. Despite their potential significance, the Palpa geoglyphs have not garnered as much attention as the nearby Nazca lines. This is likely due to their remote location, smaller size, and less striking appearance from the ground. Still, the Palpa geoglyphs remain a captivating mystery for archaeologists, historians, and enthusiasts. Moving on to the next mystery. The ocean has long captivated human imagination, providing sustenance, exploration, and trade routes for many civilizations. However, beneath its depths lies a profound mystery. The relentless advance of the ocean has swallowed entire civilizations, erasing their cities, cultures, and stories. Throughout history, thriving cultures along coastlines, deltas, and rivers have been consumed by the rising tides. The lost city of Atlantis, a legendary civilization described by Plato, has intrigued scholars for centuries. Although its existence remains disputed, the narrative underscores the fascination with the concept of a magnificent civilization consumed by the sea. Natural disasters, shifting tectonic plates, and rising sea levels have all played pivotal roles in the submersion of ancient civilizations. The destruction wrought by earthquakes and tsunamis can erase entire coastal communities from the face of the earth. The Minoan civilization, centered on the island of Crete, is an illustrative example. Around 1600 BCE, the cataclysmic eruption of the Thera volcano generated tsunamis that devastated Minoan settlements and contributed to the civilization's decline. Additionally, the inexorable rise of sea levels due to melting ice caps and climate change poses a contemporary threat. The sunken city of Pavlopetri, located off the coast of Greece, serves as a stark reminder of this phenomenon. Submerged around 1000 BCE, the ruins offer insights into early urban planning and societal organization, while also sounding a warning about the environmental challenges faced by modern coastal communities. The stories of these submerged civilizations resonate with profound lessons that extend beyond their historical contexts. They underscore the impermanence of human achievements and the vulnerability of even the most advanced societies in the face of natural forces. The oceans, which once nurtured and sustained these civilizations, now serve as repositories of their memory, reminding us of the transitory nature of human endeavors. Advancements in technology have revolutionized our ability to explore and document the submerged remnants of ancient civilizations. Underwater archaeology, remote sensing techniques, and robotic exploration tools have allowed researchers to delve into the depths and unearth treasures hidden beneath the waves. These discoveries enrich our understanding of history and culture while offering opportunities for interdisciplinary collaboration between archaeologists, oceanographers, and environmental scientists. Across cultures and civilizations, tales of a catastrophic deluge have been woven into the fabric of human history, leaving an indelible mark on our collective consciousness. From the Epic of Gilgamesh to the biblical story of Noah's Ark, the theme of a great flood that engulfs the world and reshapes humanity's destiny transcends time and geography. The Great Flood narrative is not confined to a single culture. Instead, it emerges as a universal motif that spans the globe. The Epic of Gilgamesh, one of the earliest known works of literature from ancient Mesopotamia, recounts the story of a catastrophic flood unleashed by the gods to punish humanity's transgressions. The tale of Utnapishtim, a survivor of the flood, mirrors the biblical account of Noah's Ark, where a chosen family and pairs of animals are saved from the waters. In Indian mythology, the Matsya Purana recounts the story of King Manu, who is warned of an impending flood by a fish, which later transforms into a giant fish to save him and the world's creatures. Similarly, in the Native American tradition, the Hopi people share stories of the Great Deluge describing how they were led to safety on the back of a turtle. These diverse flood narratives reflect the human impulse to grapple with questions of mortality, divine intervention, and the cyclical nature of existence. The universality of the theme suggests that, despite vast geographical distances and cultural differences, societies sought to explain the unfathomable forces of nature and their own place within the cosmos. The Great Flood narrative often serves as a moral lesson, reminding humanity of the consequences of hubris and the need for humility and respect for the natural world. It encapsulates a collective fear of the uncontrollable, a reverence for the power of the elements, and a desire for salvation and renewal. While the Great Flood narrative is deeply rooted in mythology and cultural memory, scientific investigations have sought to uncover the kernels of truth that might underlie these stories. Geological evidence suggests that catastrophic floods did occur in various regions throughout history, often resulting from the melting of glaciers, the collapse of natural dams, or tsunamis triggered by seismic events. One of the most notable examples is the flooding of the Black Sea around 7,000 years ago, which may have inspired some of the flood narratives in the region. The Mediterranean Sea once breached the natural barrier, inundating the basin and creating a dramatic flood that could have been etched into local memory and passed down through generations. The Great Flood narrative continues to resonate in modern times, offering insights into the human capacity to grapple with uncertainty and change. These narratives also prompt us to consider the ethical and moral dimensions of our relationship with the environment. They encourage us to reflect on our responsibility as stewards of the earth and the consequences of heedless exploitation of natural resources. The recurring motif of a catastrophic deluge transcends time and geography, permeating the myths and legends of numerous ancient civilizations. The Great Flood narrative holds a profound cultural significance, often serving as a foundation for a civilization's creation myths and religious beliefs. Many ancient societies attach divine meaning to the concept of a flood, using it as a backdrop to explain the origins of humanity, the gods' interactions with mortals, and the cyclical nature of life and death. The universality of the flood narrative could stem from a shared human experience of facing natural calamities, creating an empathetic bridge across cultures. Floods are among the most devastating of natural disasters, leaving a lasting imprint on societies that experience them. The documentation of the Great Flood may have been a way for ancient civilizations to cope with the fear and trauma associated with such events by imbuing them with meaning and purpose. The documentation of the Great Flood could also be rooted in the environmental realities faced by these civilizations. Many ancient settlements were situated near rivers, lakes, or coastlines, making them vulnerable to flooding. As communities were periodically ravaged by deluges, the experiences of witnessing the destruction and struggling for survival would have etched themselves into the collective memory. Over time, these experiences might have been elaborated upon and integrated into cultural narratives, serving as cautionary tales that reinforce the importance of respecting natural boundaries. The documentation of the Great Flood by so many ancient civilizations offers a window into the intricate interplay of culture, psychology, environment, and shared experience. The widespread presence of flood myths highlights how humans have long sought to understand existence, our connection with nature, and the search for meaning in an unpredictable world. Moving on to the next mystery. On October 5, 1949, 22-year-old Eddie Grant mysteriously disappeared during a hunting trip with his friends, William McMahon and Bill Young. His sudden vanishing raised immediate suspicion, prompting local authorities to launch an investigation. They focused their attention on Eddie's friends, family, and any hikers or campers who might have been in the area at the time. However, after the discovery of Eddie Grant, nearly all efforts at pursuing the investigation would come to a complete stop despite the plethora of new evidence that seemed almost impossible to explain. It's for this reason that the case of Eddie Grant is often described by paranormal investigators as a possible cover-up for something far more strange. According to the report, the three friends traveled to the Nez Perce National Forest together, located only 30 miles east of the small town of Grangeville, Idaho, for a short hunting trip that was expected to last only a few days. However, during that first day, William McMahon and Bill Young were at their campsite when Eddie Grant told them that he had wanted to spend the first day hunting on his own. After preparing his gear, Eddie Grant would leave the two others during the early morning and set out on his own in the area. Although the two others remarked that Eddie's behavior seemed rather strange, they were not worried about Eddie's safety as he had often hunted alone plenty of times in the past. Despite being a fairly young age, at only 22 years old, Eddie had more hunting and outdoors experience than both of his friends combined. Oddly enough, as the hours of the day grew late and nightfall approached, Eddie's friends began to worry that something far more nefarious had occurred. After the sun had set and Eddie Grant still had not yet returned, his two friends would quickly contact the local law enforcement agencies and National Forest Park Services to report the disappearance of Eddie Grant. Within the hour of the report having been made, a massive team of search and rescue volunteers were already in the area, including law enforcement agents, national park staff, and a huge group from the Idaho National Guard. In a rather bizarre turn of events, the Idaho National Guard would soon take charge of the search and rescue operations, alongside a team of military personnel from the nearby town of Lewiston, Idaho. On the first night of the disappearance, several military aircraft would fly over the area to help perform assistant aerial reconnaissance, helping to cover fast open areas while equipped with state-of-the-art thermal imaging technologies. By that following morning, a team of bloodhounds were on the scene and helped to cover a 4-mile radius from the campsite in an effort to find Eddie Grant's scent, but were unable to pick up any sign of the missing 22-year-old. It would be after the failure of the canines that law enforcement would begin to publicly change their stance on the disappearance of Eddie Grant and come forward with the claims that investigators were pursuing a possible suspicious case. On October 17th, 12 days after the disappearance of Eddie Grant, an article would be published in the local Lewiston newspaper, the Lewiston Morning Tribune, claiming that the Grangeville County Sheriff's Department was pursuing evidence of foul play. Additionally, the Sheriff's Department would make the public statement saying, the region where Grant was last seen, near Baldy Mountain, about 30 miles east of here, is country a man could easily walk out of, with the department essentially expressing disbelief that Grant could have been lost in the open terrain that should have been easy to reorient himself from using the mountain as a guiding point. By this point in the investigation, many of the search and rescue volunteers felt that something incredibly unusual had happened to Eddie Grant and that resources could better be used elsewhere, causing the search and rescue operations to slow and come to an almost complete halt. Despite the official search for Eddie Grant slowing down, Grant's close friends and family would continue an unofficial search for Eddie, following areas where they believed the 22-year-old would have traveled. It would be on the 39th day of Eddie's disappearance during mid-November that Eddie's friends would discover him at the edge of an unnamed creek located only 1.5 miles away from their hunting campsite. An article published in the Spokesman Review newspaper would talk about the incident on November 16th, a day following the discovery of Eddie. The article would write that the three people who found Eddie Grant were his two brothers, Marvin and Milton Grant, and a close family friend by the name of Earl P. According to the three men, Eddie was found face down and appeared to have tripped over a large tree limb. However, even more strange was that many of Eddie's items were missing, including his rifle, his hat, his hunting equipment, and his leather chaps. Despite Eddie's rifle having been missing, searchers would discover an 8mm expended cartridge less than 1 mile from where he was found, as if Eddie had fired off a round but then lost his rifle shortly after. Even more peculiar, It appeared as if Eddie's boots had been slashed open and cut through in several different spots. Investigators would later claim that despite the severe wounds, strange swelling, and large slashes against his boots, there was no evidence of foul play. The official explanation that the investigators would claim about the strange slashes was that they believed that Eddie used his hunting knife to cut open his boots to help alleviate his swelling feet and may have accidentally cut into his feet while doing so. Additionally, investigators would claim that Eddie Grant tripped over a branch and must have been too exhausted to get up, causing him to lay on the ground face down until he passed away from exposure. Friends and family would reject many of these bizarre explanations and felt that something far more nefarious had happened to Eddie Grant. Many would later remark that it seemed incredibly unlikely for Eddie to have slashed away at his boots while in such a precarious situation, as well as the fact that swollen feet require you to tighten your boots, not loosen them. The absence of Eddie's hunting knife and scabbard further complicated the case, making it seem unlikely that he had injured himself, as he would not have had access to his knife for miles after disappearing. Moving on to the next mystery. On the morning of September 16, 1994, teachers and school officials at the Ariel School in Rara, Zimbabwe were stunned when 62 children, aged 5 to 12, reported seeing a flying object land on the school grounds. At the time, the teachers were in a meeting, leaving the children unsupervised during their recess. The only adult present was a mother running the school tuck shop, a snack bar selling candy, snacks, and sodas. According to some sources, UFOs had been seen in the skies over Zimbabwe for 2 days before the incident occurred. Rawa is around 20 kilometers from the capital of Zimbabwe, and Ariel School is a private elementary school. The children said that they'd first seen 3 objects in the sky. These objects would disappear and then reappear in different locations. The objects moved closer and closer to the ground and finally landed in a brushy area adjacent to the schoolyard. This area had not been fully cleared and was off-limits to the students. The object landed or hovered just above the ground in an area around 100 meters from the students. The children said that a small man about 1 meter in height appeared on the top of the object. The little man, who was described as having a scrawny neck, long black hair and huge eyes, walked a short way across the ground towards the students. When he noticed the children, he vanished and then reappeared at the back of the object. The objects then took off and vanished. The smaller children were very frightened and cried for help. They believed that the little man was a demon who would eat them. African children have heard legends of Tokolossus, demons who come for children. The children ran to the tuck shop operator, but she did not want to leave the shop unattended. The late Cynthia Hind, known as Africa's former UFO investigator, investigated the cause the next day. When she was first contacted, she asked the headmaster of the school, Colin Mackey, to have the children draw pictures of what they saw. When she arrived at the school, he had around 35 drawings for her. The drawings were of very similar objects. The headmaster affirmed that he believed the students were telling the truth, and one little girl said the following: "I swear by every hair on my head and the whole Bible that I'm telling the truth." Dr. John Mack, the renowned abduction researcher, and his team visited the Ariel School in Rara, Zimbabwe, where they spent 2 days interviewing and counseling 12 children and their parents. Interestingly, the older students shared that they felt the creatures were communicating with them, conveying a message about the destruction of our planet and the dangers of pollution. One child claimed these thoughts were transmitted through the creature's eyes. The incident gained further attention when Sightings, a TV show, reported on the event, and video footage of the children's testimonies was recorded. So, the question remains, what do you think these children saw? Moving on to the next mystery. In 2011, one of the most incredible discoveries of the century took place, and the findings were recently made public earlier this year. This discovery, hailed as the most complete and best-preserved nodosaur fossil ever found, is considered one of the most significant and insightful dinosaur fossils ever uncovered. Discovered by accident by a group of miners back on the March 21, 2011, of whom were using new state-of-the-art excavator equipment to dig down for the energy company Suncor, were soon stopped by a large mass in the ground that seemed impenetrable by modern excavator equipment as archaeological teams came in to recover what had been found. It turned out to be a completely and perfectly fossilized specimen of a nodosaur that was so intact. New information could be recovered about the species in striking detail. Layers of its skin were fossilized. Its last meal could be seen in the lining of its stomach. The weight and the size of the creature was accurately mapped, and previously drawings of the complete makeup of the dinosaur was rendered useless as the fully preserved design changed the future of the way dinosaurs have been perceived forever. Rather than just finding a dinosaur skeleton, the mummified nodosaur recovered was a fossil of a dinosaur as it would have looked in the wild. Further research revealed that the creature was over 110 million years old. It was remarkably preserved after falling into the ocean, where it was quickly covered by minerals and mud, which helped prevent bacterial growth and slowed the usual decay process. Moving on to the next mystery. A mysterious and continuously active object has been discovered in Jupiter's orbit, suspected to be a Trojan asteroid. What makes it intriguing is that scientists have never encountered anything like it before. This strange object is known officially as 2019 LD2, is reported to have what astronomers are calling a comet-like tail. This tail is composed of stardust and various cosmic gases. The first time 2019 LD2 was spotted was by the Atlas telescope system during the summer of 2019 by the University of Hawaii, but it was not until autumn of 2019 that investigations into the nature of the object officially began. It was then that they suspected it was a Trojan asteroid. It reappeared in the spring of 2020, when researchers found that it had been active for almost a year. Trojan asteroids are ancient. Because of this, they often lack materials, such as ice water on their surface to suggest they are more than just another deceased lifeless satellite. But 2019 LD2's sudden activeness suggests that it was recently reintroduced to new materials, or materials from deep within started to react and leave the asteroid's core. According to Alan Fitzsimmons, who was one of the researchers that identified the object, we have believed for decades that Trojan asteroids should have large amounts of ice beneath their surfaces, but never had any evidence until now. Atlas has shown that the predictions of their icy nature may well be correct. Neptune has dozens of Trojan asteroids, Earth has one, and Jupiter allegedly has 100 of 1,000. However, few, if any, are active, all but 2019 LD2. Scientists are not sure what triggered 2019 LD2 to become active, but the most prevalent theory is that it collided with another asteroid that sent it into a proper orbit, but more research has to be conducted. Larry Denault, the co-principal investigator of the Atlas project, claims, even though the Atlas system is designed to search for dangerous asteroids, Atlas sees another rare phenomena in our solar system and beyond while scanning the sky. A Trojan asteroid, as the name suggests, is not really an asteroid. Neither is it a comet. It's something else. The name likewise implies that although the natural satellite may take the appearance of a comet or asteroid, it might have unexpected minerals or materials hidden within. The most common Trojan asteroid are those that follow Jupiter's orbit, but as mentioned, every one of them is considered deceased. Jupiter obtained this colossal number of deceased asteroids over 1 billion years ago, with some joining sometime afterwards. But the majority of the asteroids lifelessly floating near Jupiter predate humanity, as many things in space often do. Jupiter's immense gravity draws these loose, rogue asteroids with its gravity field keeping them in place. If you were to travel to Jupiter, you would surely see the celestial swarm of these extraordinary asteroids from miles away, seemingly adorning the gas giant. However, after months of in-depth research into the object, it was found that the mysterious object was, in fact, a comet, removing the theory of it being a Trojan unknown object. Comets are far more fascinating than asteroids because they tend to have a wispy tail and glowing aura surrounding them, explaining the object's tail. This doesn't change the fact that it is suddenly activated, seemingly by itself. Alongside the collision theory is the landslide theory that a landslide happened on 2019 LD2's surface, causing this reaction. Trojan asteroids remain largely unknown, but NASA plans to launch a probe between 2027 and 2033 to study them up close. This mission could offer valuable insights into Jupiter's history, the formation of asteroids and planets, and how they function. Moving on to the next mystery. In 1874, America experienced its first ever ransom kidnapping with the abduction of Charles Brewster Ross, commonly known as Charlie. Although nearly 150 years have passed, Charlie Ross's case remains unresolved, and his ultimate fate is still a mystery. Born on May 4, 1870, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to Christian K. Ross and Sarah, and he grew up alongside 3 sisters and 2 brothers. The family enjoyed a period of relative prosperity, living on an expansive estate in Germantown, one of Philadelphia's affluent neighborhoods. On July 1, 1874, Charlie and his 6-year-old brother Walter were playing in the family's front garden. At that time, Sarah was recuperating from an illness in Atlantic City, and Christian was occupied with his work at the store. The household servants were responsible for watching over the children. Initially, when one of the maids mentioned that the boys had been seen playing on the street with friends, Christian was not overly concerned about their absence from the garden. However, his alarm grew when a neighbor reported witnessing the boys being taken away in a horse-drawn carriage. It was later uncovered that over a period of several days, 2 men had supplied the children with sweets. And on July 1st, they'd approached and offered Charlie and Walter not only sweets, but fireworks too. They promised the children they'd get both of these things if they agreed to ride with the strangers. The boys agreed, but shortly after pulling away from their home, 4-year-old Charlie began to cry. Walter was dropped off at a local store and given money to buy fireworks. But when he returns, the kidnappers and his brother were gone. Walter was soon reunited with his family by a local citizen, but Charlie remained missing. On July 3rd, Christian placed an ad in the local paper offering $300 for his son's safe return. Soon after this, he began to receive ransom letters from the apparent kidnappers. The letters came in the form of notes mailed from post offices in Philadelphia and beyond, and they were written poorly. The handwriting was described as odd, while the writing itself barely literate with extremely poor spelling and grammar. The ransom letters demanded $20,000 for the safe return of Charlie, which is the equivalent of around $450,000 today. The kidnappers cautioned the family against contacting law enforcement and threatened to hurt Charlie if Christian did not cooperate. However, by this point in time, the Ross family had lost a considerable amount of their wealth. Although they continued to live in a large house in an affluent area, Christian's store was beginning to buckle due to the stock market crash of '73, and the family was heavily in debt. As a result, they simply could not afford the ransom demands. The family saw no way out, and so they contacted their local police departments. Several prominent Philadelphians enlisted the help of the famous Pinkerton Detective Agency, the same agency which we've covered on a previous episode of Cold Case Detective discussing Dorothy Arnold. The agency printed thousands of flyers and posters featuring Charlie's likeness. And while the police officers conducted one of the 19th century's biggest manhunts, they could not locate the missing 4-year-old. While several attempts were made to deliver the ransom money to the kidnappers, each time the perpetrators failed to appear. After 23 notes, Charlie's abductors ceased communicating with his family. The case took a twist 5 months later when on the night of December 13th, the house of a judge living in Brooklyn was burgled. The judge's brother who lived next door gathered members of his household, and they each armed themselves with weapons and set out to catch the intruders. The men gunned down both burglars, career criminals named Bill Mosher and Joe Douglas, who were recently released from jail. While Mosher was killed instantly, Douglas lived 2 more hours and was able to briefly communicate with the men who had shot him. It seems to be rather unclear exactly what Joe Douglas said that night, but the general consensus appears to be that he admitted that he and Moshe had abducted Charlie Ross. But he also said that his now-dead partner knew the current location of the 4-year-old. After this, however, his statements became unclear again. There is some confusion over whether he admitted that Charlie was dead or whether he stated that the boy would be returned to his family in a few days. It seemed to be agreed upon that Douglas would have no reason to lie because he knew he was dying when he confessed. If Charlie was still alive at the time the 2 men passed away, he was never returned to his family. Soon after this, Walter Ross was taken to New York to see if he could identify Moshe and Douglas as the men who'd taken Charlie that day in July. Walter immediately recognized them, especially Moshe, who had a distinctly malformed nose as the cartilage had been destroyed by cancer. It was soon discovered that a disgraced policeman named William Westervelt was an associate of Bill Mosher and also his brother-in-law. Westervelt was arrested and held in connection with the case. And in 1875, he was tried for Charlie's kidnapping. While awaiting trial, Westervelt apparently told Christian that Charlie was alive at the time of Mosher's death. However, the former police officer could not be tied to the crime, and Walter insisted that he was not one of the kidnappers. Subsequently, Westervelt was found not guilty of kidnapping, but was convicted of a lesser conspiracy charge and ultimately served 6 years in prison, though he continued to maintain his innocence throughout his sentence. In the first year alone following Charlie's kidnapping, 600 sightings flooded in from all across the country, but sadly none of them panned out. 2 years after he went missing, Christian's father wrote a book about the case and had it published. He used the money he made from his best-selling novel to continue his search for his son's whereabouts. By 1878, the media frenzy surrounding the case began to piece around. To renew interest, Christian had the book reprinted and began giving lectures in Boston. Both he and Charlie's mother, Sarah Ann, continued to search for their son until the day they passed away. Christian in 1897 and Sarah in 1912. The couple followed copious amounts of leads, interviewed over 570 people, and spent approximately $60,000 searching for Charlie, hoping that one day they could bring him home. In 1924, to coincide with the 50th anniversary of when Charlie vanished, the local papers began reporting on the case again. By that time, Walter Ross was an adult and working as a stockbroker. He reported that he and his siblings continued to receive letters from men claiming to be their missing brother. And during their lifetime, it was found that the siblings investigated around 1,000 impersonators. The most notable of these came from a man named Gustav Blair, who was a 69-year-old carpenter living in Phoenix, Arizona in 1934 when he came forward. He petitioned for the courts to recognize him as the real Charlie Ross, claiming that he'd been abducted as a child and lived in a cave for a time before being adopted by a man who later told him in 198 that he was the missing 4-year-old from Philadelphia and that he had kept him for the kidnappers. The Ross siblings were not happy about this, with Walter exhausted from the years of con men attempting to get a slice of the family inheritance, labeling Blair a crank and saying that he found Blair's story to be unconvincing. He added later that he believed the idea of Charlie still being alive was absurd, stating, "We've long ago given up hope that Charlie would ever be found alive." Despite their unhappiness, the Ross family did not spend time contesting Blair's claims, and so the court ruled that he was Charles Brewster Ross. Even with this, Blair was never acknowledged by the family as their missing brother, and they did not leave him any money or property from their parents' estates. For a short while, Blair moved to LA and attempted to sell his life story to a movie studio, but this endeavor failed. He eventually moved to Germantown, then back to Phoenix with his wife. Blair died in December of 1943, age 73, still claiming to be Charlie Ross. However, his descendants later took a DNA test which conclusively proved he was not the missing child, but really a man named Nelson Miller. The fates of Westervelt, Mosher, and Douglas served as a deterrent to anyone who wished to kidnap for ransom. In 1900, another high-profile ransom case emerged when 16-year-old Edward Cootie Jr. was abducted while running errands. The Charlie Ross case not only inspired the famous warning, "Don't take candy from strangers," but also lent its name to the missing persons database known as the Charlie Project. Furthermore, this incident prompted Pennsylvania to become the first state to elevate kidnapping from a misdemeanor to a felony. The Ross family home was demolished in 1926, and Walter died in 1943, possibly marking the final opportunity to recover Charlie. This case remains unusual because, although the kidnappers' identities are known, Charlie's whereabouts have never been determined. Even after nearly 150 years, both authorities and his family remain uncertain about his ultimate fate. Moving on to the next mystery. On January 17, 1982, truck driver Eric Bertrand and stay-at-home mother Evelyn welcomed Magali into the world. Raised in the town of Langhans, Magali was the eldest of 5 children. When she was 12, her parents divorced in 1994, after which her father moved to Switzerland to start a new life and remarry. Despite the separation, They maintained a close relationship. Feeling deeply affected by the divorce, Magali chose to remain in France with her mother. At the age of 16, on July 12, 1998, she met Jeffrey Part, who was 23 at the time. Jeffrey had grown up in a turbulent environment, spending part of his childhood in foster care due to his father's struggle with alcoholism, though he later reconciled and re-established his bond with his father. He had just spent a few days in jail after his ex-girlfriend accused him of domestic abuse when he first met Magali. After finding out about Jeffrey's past, Magali's mother voiced distaste for the young guy. After a falling out between mother and daughter, Magali moved in with her father and started working as a caregiver at a retirement community. The 18-year-old Magali wed Jeffrey in 2000. After relocating to the town of Ornex, Magali started working at a do-it-yourself store, and her husband found work as a painter and decorator. Magali fed Jeffrey breakfast on March 26, 2001, before he departed for work. That day, he wasn't scheduled to be at work, but for unknown reasons, he either chose to go in or was requested to. While they were eating, Magali informed him that she intended to walk their Rottweiler puppy to a convenience store to get cigarettes. It was just a 2.5-mile journey there and back. However, when Jeffrey got home at 4:30 from work, he found that neither his wife nor his new puppy were there. Since Magali had prepared breakfast, the kitchen had not been cleaned up. The 19-year-old was usually a tidy person who cleaned up after herself, so this was really strange. Jeffrey called Magali's parents, who had not seen her, out of concern. When he arrived at her job at around 5 o'clock in the evening, he discovered that she had not reported sick and had not shown up for her afternoon shift. After that, Jeffrey reported his wife missing at the police station. After that, he went back to his house and enlisted the aid of a friend with an ATV to assist him in his search for Magali. In order to get some rest, they decided to end the quest at around 5 in the morning. Around 11 in the morning, a young man who was picking mushrooms next to his uncle's farm found the body of a woman. She had been burned and was just half-clothed. The man believed at first that someone had dropped a mannequin, but upon closer inspection, he saw that his assumption was incorrect. After he ran to his uncle's farm, they made a police call. Investigators recognized the deceased as 19-year-old Mag parties using the report that Jeffrey submitted and personalized jewelry engraved with the couple's names and wedding dates. They found a chocolate bar wrapper, a knife with its blade wedged into a tree, and a cigarette butt next to the body. They found a gasoline-filled jerry can 300 meters away. After analysis, it was discovered that the cigarette butt belonged to a Moroccan brand that was only available in Switzerland. Interestingly, investigators discovered no evidence of a fire at the site where Magali's body was discovered, indicating to them that she was killed elsewhere and her remains were subsequently disposed of in the woodlands. 2 days after Magali disappeared, on March 28, an autopsy was performed. She had been assaulted, sustaining 12 fractures across her body. The medical examiner was unable to ascertain the precise moment of her death because she had been burned later. In addition, Magali's cause of death has never been made public. Additionally, the ME found sperm within the 19-year-old's body, indicating that she had engaged in sexual activity 48 hours before to her passing. But there was nothing to suggest that she had experienced sexual assault. The ME discovered a prescription drug for anxiety inside her veins. Investigators were never able to locate a prescription for the medicine in Magali's name, and neither Jeffrey nor her family was aware that she was using it. Even though Magali didn't smoke this brand, further examination of the cigarette, but that was found at the site revealed that her DNA was present. Even stranger, investigators discovered that the cigarette had been thrown away following the 19-year-old's passing. It also prompted law officials to speculate about the likelihood of manufactured scenes. Magali's possessions were not found with her death and have not been found again in the years that have passed. However, the Rottweiler puppy showed up 5.5 miles from Ornex in the town of Kosui, unhurt and hungry. The puppy was clean and dry even though it had been raining between the 26th and the 28th. She had the scent of Magali's fragrances, too. She lost her leash, which has never been found. Even though the dog might have interacted with the offender, Jeffrey received her back from the police instead of having her examined for forensic evidence. Following Magali's last known actions, the investigators discovered that the 19-year-old had gone out with 2 pals the day before she passed away. Investigators learned from one of the acquaintances that Magali had said her that year's birthday present of underwear was from Jeffrey's father, Patrick. Magali checked her voicemail and shut off her phone at 10 o'clock that same day. The man's uncle, who discovered her death that morning, said that his dogs had been barking nonstop for some time, maybe sensing someone in the woods. This happened at 2 and 5 in the morning. Regarding his role, Patrick doesn't seem to have ever addressed the fact that he gave lingerie to his daughter-in-law. Jeffrey dismissed the accusation as untrue. On the 26th, the day of Magali's disappearance, Patrick says he went to the couple's home at 10 in the morning to get the mail, but she wasn't there. The reason Patrick's mail was at the couple's house is unknown. Someone tried to withdraw about $400 from an ATM on the 26th in the town of St. Jean-Pied at 1 p.m., but they were unable because they had entered the incorrect PIN. But this person also had Jeffrey's credit card, so they took $35 out of his accounts. It seems that the unidentified person knew his PIN. The specifics of what happened are unknown since we were unable to locate any information that would have explained how the murderer had gotten Jeffrey's credit card or whether or not he had reported it missing. Magali was in this same town on the day of her death, between 9:30 and 11 a.m., according to 3 other eyewitnesses. Her family doesn't know how or why she came to be here. The 19-year-old didn't have a car, therefore it was a very lengthy walk for them to get Smokes on foot. Nonetheless, every eyewitness has acknowledged that they could not be positive that the young woman they saw was Magali. Magali's case has not received much media coverage throughout the years. Her family has been dissatisfied with the investigation's lack of progress and has regularly expressed their suffering to the media because the murder happened close to them. Given that the murder happened near the Swiss border, journalists there started to show an interest in the case and start discussing it, eventually exposing multiple shortcomings on the part of the police. They said that photos of tire tracks discovered at the scene had been lost, DNA samples had been lost, and then found again during the investigation, and the police had been so convinced that Magali was the victim of a random attack that they had not looked into other options in detail. The intensity of the attack suggested that the 19-year-old was the target of great anger. However, their automobiles were not inspected, and friends, relatives, and co-workers were not appropriately questioned. Law police also thought that Magali had been seen that day in a different place by the eyewitnesses. They therefore did not look into alternative hypotheses and firmly felt that she had vanished at the time of her last sighting. Jeffrey, Magali's spouse, was excluded from consideration as a suspect due to his unwavering alibi and non-existence of a vehicle. 3 years after her passing, in 2004, it was found that the 19-year-old had missed multiple days of work in the months before the crime. Nevertheless, this information was unknown to Jeffrey and the other family members. 2 years later, Patrick and Jeffrey were detained by the police and interrogated. In the end, they were freed because there was insufficient evidence to connect either man to the crime. Although Jeffrey has never disclosed the identity of the attacker to the public, it is said that he knows who they are. When Magali vanished, according to his father, who was questioned over the lingerie episodes, he was at home. His alibi's degree of tightness is unknown. Since then, there have been very little updates on Magali's situation. Eric, her father, organized fundraisers in 2015 to enable the family to employ a private detective. The private investigation company confirmed to media what they already knew. The police made numerous mistakes during the initial investigation and might have overlooked important details as a result. Magali's body was excavated in 2016 to conduct more analysis, but no meaningful results were obtained. Jeffrey, Magali's husband, remarried and had 4 children with his new spouse after she passed away. He took his own life on September 15, 2018. Magali's parents remain uncertain about how to cope with his suicide, questioning whether it was driven by grief over losing Magali or by feelings of guilt. His new wife maintains that the murder cast a shadow over their entire marriage, even though he never mentioned his murdered wife in his suicide notes. In a 2020 re-examination, fingerprints were found on a cigarette but recovered from the crime scene, but they were linked to an unidentified individual. Additionally, the prints proved too powerful for either Jeffrey or his father, Patrick. The case remains unresolved. Moving on to the next mystery. In March 1980, 18-year-old Carol Barrett from Zanesville, Ohio, began what was supposed to be an enjoyable spring break trip with her friends to Daytona Beach, Florida. However, the vacation turned devastating when an armed man abducted her from her motel room. Despite the frantic rescue attempts by her friends and extensive police investigations, Carol's body was discovered days later near Jacksonville, Florida, far from her last known location. Her horrific murder remained unsolved for decades. Carol and Barrett grew up in the close-knit community of Zanesville, Ohio, a town renowned for its strong family values. As one of 6 siblings, she was raised in a warm and supportive household. The tight bonds within her family and the communal spirit of her hometown were always central to her life. Wayne and Patricia Barrett, Carol's parents, were actively engaged in their children's lives, ensuring they had a stable and supportive upbringing. From an early age, Carol displayed resilience and independence, earning the admiration of both her family and friends. Her level-headedness and practicality were qualities that made her well-liked and respected by those who knew her. Carol possessed a calm demeanor and the ability to manage stressful situations with poise, qualities that her family believed would benefit her as she grew older. By the age of 18, Carol had cultivated a wide range of interests and a strong sense of direction for her future. As a dedicated member of her high school band, she enjoyed the travel and performance opportunities it provided. One standout trip to Colorado sparked a love for exploring new places, further fueling her desire to experience the world. This subsequently fueled her desire to plan a spring break trip to Daytona Beach, Florida. Carol's father, Wayne Barrett, had reservations about the trip, but relented. He knew how much it meant to his daughter. Carol had worked part-time at a Wendy's restaurant to save up for the trip for nearly a year. As spring break approached, the excitement was palpable. On March 20th, 1980, Carol and her friends embarked on a road trip to Florida, driving through the night. Once they arrived, they checked into the Treasure Island Inn, a well-known oceanfront hotel in Daytona Beach shores. Eager to enjoy their time away, the group quickly headed to the beach, excited for a week of fun and relaxation in the Florida sun. However, their vacation took a chilling turn in the early hours of March 23rd. After a night of socializing in the girls' oceanfront room on the 6th floor, Carol and a friend, 18-year-old Scott Grubb, left to visit a nearby store. This was around 2 a.m. As Carol and Scott made their way towards the elevator, they were suddenly confronted by a man waving a gun. The assailant aggressively forced them back towards their motel room. He demanded that they re-enter. Worried about the intruder's motives, their friend Steve insisted they couldn't access the room because they didn't have a key. However, the gunman was undeterred and shoved Steve toward the door. In fear, both Steve and Carol banged on the door until one of their friends opened it from the inside. Upon entering, the gunman seemed momentarily startled by the number of people in the room, but quickly regained composure. He ordered everyone to remove their clothes and, after a tense exchange, took about $200 in cash from the group. Then, stating his need for a hostage to facilitate his escape, he initially chose 17-year-old Pam Queen. But when Pam reacted with immediate hysteria, he reconsidered. He muttered that she would be too problematic. Instead, Carol volunteered to go in her place. She opted to keep calm under pressure. The gunman instructed Carol to dress while he corralled the others, still undressed, onto the balcony. He assured them that Carol would be released within an hour. He then locked the sliding glass door behind them as he escorted Carol out of the room. Carol's friends shouted for help, but when no one responded, they knew they had to take action. One of the boys daringly crossed to an adjacent balcony. He carefully avoided a dangerous 70-foot drop. Once there, he alerted the surprised residents. They then immediately called the police. The police response was quick, but the kidnapper and Carol had a 20-minute head start. The initial search was hampered by the lack of witnesses or any clue of the vehicle used. Carol's friends provided a detailed description of the man to the police. Described as a man in his early 20s, around 5 feet 10 inches tall, with reddish-brown hair. He had a beard, mustache, and a distinctive mole on his left cheek. He was last seen wearing a brown suede jacket, tan pants, and gold aviator-style glasses. Despite this detailed description, the leads were slim. The hopes that Carol would be released within an hour faded as sunrise came and went. As the hours passed with no sign of Carol, the reality of the situation began to sink in. Pam, taking on the painful duty of informing Carol's parents, relayed the devastating news. Carol's father, Wayne, who had been initially reluctant about the trip, was overwhelmed with worry. He tried his best to hold on to hope due to Carol's known resilience and level-headedness. As dawn broke with no word from or about Carol, her parents, alongside her friends, clung to the hope instilled by the abductor's words. They prayed for her safe return. The FBI joined the investigation. They assisted local authorities by interviewing other guests and staff at the Treasure Island Inn. Unfortunately, no useful information emerged. The next day, Daytona Beach detectives were alerted to the discovery of a young woman's body in a remote area near the Jacksonville airport. This is almost 100 miles from where Carol was last seen. Found 30 feet from Interstate 95, the woman was dressed similarly to Carol at the time of her abduction. Two of Carol's friends traveled to Jacksonville to identify the body. They confirmed everyone's worst nightmare. Carol had met a violent end. Carol's friends and family, who held on to hope of her safe return, were devastated by the grim discovery. Despite initial promises by the abductor that she would be released, her life was senselessly taken much too soon. When discovered, Carol showed no obvious injuries despite some dried blood on her face. An autopsy later revealed she had been fatally shot once in the back of her head. This was done with a small-caliber gun. She was found partially clothed with her upper body exposed. Her white sweater was over her head and her t-shirt nearby. Her jewelry remained intact. The autopsy also noted that she was assaulted. There were no defensive wounds. This suggested that Carol was probably unaware of the imminent danger and was shot execution style, likely without warning. Detectives facing a lack of leads relied on the description from Carol's friends to create a composite sketch of the suspect. This sketch was distributed to police across the country, to toll collectors on major East Coast highways, and featured in local newspapers and on television. Detectives pored over every detail from forensic evidence at the crime scene to interviews with potential witnesses. They even analyzed traffic camera footage and questioned known criminals in the area. They took a close look at similar crimes in neighboring states, hoping for a breakthrough that would link the cases. Even after the suspect's sketch was widely circulated, weeks turned into months without any significant leads. Years passed, and Carol's family, while devastated, continued to work with law enforcement. They urged them to keep the case open and the public engaged. Each year, on the anniversary of Carol's disappearance, local newspapers would feature stories reminding the community of the unresolved crime. They hoped to jog someone's memory or conscience, but eventually, the case went completely cold. It was not until August 2017 that Carol's case was reopened by the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit after a detailed review of the evidence. A few years later in 2020, a significant breakthrough came when 65-year-old Billy Mansfield Jr. was identified as a suspect. He is a convicted serial offender and was already imprisoned since 1982 for the slayings of multiple other women. Mansfield, who was 24 at the time of Carol's tragic demise, confessed in September 2022 to being the person depicted in the initial police sketch. His confession happened after multiple interviews lasting over 2 years. He admitted to both the abduction and the violent crime. Mansfield had been convicted in 1982 of brutally taking the lives of 5 different women across California and Florida. His home in Hernando County, Florida, had the gruesome discovery site of 4 sets of human remains during the initial investigations. 2 of these remains were identified quickly, but 2 remained unidentified until 2022. Deputies did not say how the search was narrowed to Mansfield, but Dan Jansen, Jacksonville's Sheriff's Office cold case supervisor, said that the Sheriff's Office had a partial palm print from the suspect to accompany the police sketch. Although he confessed to the Carol Barrett case in 2024, authorities chose not to pursue further prosecution. Mansfield is already serving a life sentence in California and 4 concurrent life sentences in Florida for his previous convictions. After almost 44 years, this breakthrough provided some closure to Carol's family. This confirmed the identity of the perpetrator after years of agonizing uncertainty. Blair Gilligan, Carol's niece, said she was 3 years old when her aunt's life was taken, but does remember her. She wants others to remember her as well. Blair had no memory of the day she nearly drowned as a small child, but she does know she is here today because of her Aunt Carol. She jumped in and pulled me out, and gave me CPR until the ambulance came. Carol demonstrated heroism in countless ways. Despite her youth, Claire described Carol as a second mother to me. I vividly recall her giving me baths, always using those distinctive little oil bath beads, and even preparing corn with mozzarella cheese just for me. No-bake cookies were not only Carol's absolute favorite, but also a treat you cherished. Claire remembered her as a devoted daughter, sister, and friend, a person whose trustworthy nature and easygoing manner made everyone feel comfortable around her. Although the case's resolution provides some measure of closure, it remains bittersweet since Mansfield will not face further prosecution because of his existing life sentences. As a result, Carol's family will never see him specifically held responsible for her tragic fate. Ryan Bachman, the founder of Project Cold Case, noted that for some families, simply knowing the identity of the perpetrator and that they are no longer a threat is enough to bring closure. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing unsolved mysteries with me. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Unsolved Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps me bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any mysteries you'd like me to cover next. See you in the next video.